The Galactic Council Hall was silent. Not normal silence, heavy silence, the kind that comes before bad news. Veterans from 20 star systems stood in a wide circle. Their armor carried marks of old wars. Some had missing limbs replaced with metal. Some had scars across their faces. These were not normal soldiers. They were legends. They had defeated the hive swarms of Karth. They had survived the machine revolt of Zyra. They had hunted the void serpents in deep space. They had stopped the sun eaters of Talgor. They had burned enemy worlds without regret. They had crushed powerful empires. They had faced extinction and survived. They did not fear death. But tonight, something was wrong. In the center of the hall stood Supreme War Commander Ral'Vek. He was the oldest living warrior in the Alliance. His armor was cracked down the chest. His left horn was broken from an old battle. His medals were dark, stained by the blood of enemies long forgotten. He had won more wars than anyone in the room. And yet, his hands were shaking. The young officers noticed it first. Whispers spread quietly across the hall. Why was the commander afraid? Finally, a young alien officer stepped forward. His voice was careful. "Commander, is the new species truly that dangerous?" Ral'Vek did not answer. Instead, he turned toward the massive hologram projector behind him. The lights dimmed. A single word appeared in bright white letters. Humans. The air felt colder. A few veterans exchanged confused looks. Someone gave a short laugh. "They're small," one veteran said. "They have no claws, no natural armor, no plasma glands, no hive mind." Another warrior crossed his arms. "They only won 2 small border conflicts, hardly impressive." A few nodded. Ral'Vek slowly lifted his head. "You are wrong." His voice was quiet, not angry, afraid. The laughter stopped. "I have fought monsters that eat stars," he said. The room grew still. "I have faced creatures that turn planets to dust." He looked at each warrior carefully. "But humans," he paused, "they fight differently." The hologram changed. A battlefield appeared. Smoke covered the sky. Buildings were broken. Fire burned across the ground. Human soldiers stood behind broken metal walls. They were outnumbered. No retreat ships waited for them. No reinforcements were coming. Above them, enemy warships blocked the sky like dark clouds. The young officer whispered, "They are finished." Ral'Vek closed his eyes slowly. "That is what we thought." The recording continued. Humans were falling. They were bleeding. They were tired. Explosions shook their position. Their defenses were collapsing. Then something changed. One human stood up, then another, and suddenly they charged forward, not backward, forward. The council watched in silence. The humans attacked an army 5 times larger than their own. They did not scream in fear. They screamed in rage. One human kept fighting after losing an arm. Another carried a wounded friend while firing with one hand. When their weapons ran out, they used knives. When knives broke, they used metal tools. When tools shattered, they used their bare hands. They fought like beings who had already accepted death. The video ended. The hall was silent again. No one laughed this time. One veteran finally asked in a low voice, "Why would they do that?" Ral'Vek opened his eyes. "Because humans do not fight to win." He looked around the circle. They fight to protect. He pointed to the frozen image on the screen. Behind the human soldiers, hidden in underground shelters, were civilians, families, children. The commander's voice became softer. They knew they would die. He paused, but they fought anyway. The room felt smaller and colder. That, Ral'Vek said quietly, is far more dangerous than any monster. The word humans glowed again behind him, and for the first time in history, the greatest warriors of the galaxy felt something they had not felt in centuries: fear.
Years earlier, humanity had just stepped into the galaxy. Their ships were not the largest, their weapons were not the strongest, their technology was still growing. They were curious. They sent messages of peace. They asked for trade. They asked for knowledge. Many older empires saw them as children. One empire saw something else: opportunity. The Zarn Dominion had ruled its sector for centuries. They believed strength was the only law. Weak species either served or disappeared. When Zarn scouts found a small human colony near the edge of their territory, they did not call it first contact. They called it expansion. The attack came without warning. Zarn warships entered orbit and blocked all signals. Satellites were destroyed within minutes. Defense stations were burned out of the sky. Then the cities were hit. Plasma fire fell like rain. Buildings collapsed. Power grids failed. The human governor tried to send a distress signal. The message never left the system. On the Zarn flagship, Commander Threx watched calmly. "Minimal resistance," one officer reported. "Primitive structures," said another. Threx gave a cold smile. "Send ground forces, endless quickly." Zarn soldiers landed in heavy armor. They expected fear. They expected surrender. Instead, they found empty streets. Civilians had vanished. The humans had moved fast. Children, elders, and families were taken into deep underground shelters built for mining and storms. Every able adult stayed behind: farmers, engineers, teachers, doctors. They did not wear military uniforms. They wore work clothes, but they carried weapons: old rifles, mining tools, homemade explosives. The Zarn commander laughed when he saw the first resistance. "Primitive," he said again. On the first day, the Zarn pushed forward easily. On the second day, something changed. Explosions hit supply transports. Hidden traps destroyed armored vehicles. Underground tunnels allowed humans to appear and disappear without warning. They studied the Zarn armor carefully. They noticed a weak point near the joint under the arm. Within hours, every human fighter was aiming for it. They adapted fast, too fast. Zarn patrols began to vanish. Communication towers were sabotaged. Fuel depots were burned at night. The humans did not fight in open fields. They fought from shadows. They fought from ruins. They fought like people who had nothing left to lose. By the third day, half of the Zarn army was gone. Commander Threx stopped smiling. "This is impossible," one Zarn officer said. "They have no training." Threx stared at the burning city below. "No," he said slowly, "they are learning." The Zarn finally overwhelmed the colony with heavy bombardment. The planet fell. The human flag was torn down. Officially, the Zarn won, but victory did not feel like victory. Casualty reports were higher than expected, much higher. Ships were damaged, resources were lost, morale was shaken. The Zarn had defeated stronger enemies before with fewer losses. This had been a weak species, And yet, the cost was painful. Then something even more worrying happened. Earth did not scream. Earth did not beg for revenge. There were no angry broadcasts, no emotional speeches, only silence. Across human space, fleets began to move. Shipyards worked night and day. Factories expanded. New warships rolled out quietly, slowly, carefully. Humans did not rush into battle. They prepared. They studied Zarn tactics. They studied Zarn weaknesses. They remembered every loss. Other empires noticed. Trade routes shifted. Borders grew tense. Whispers spread across the galaxy. The humans are building. They are not reacting. They are planning. And that was when the galaxy began to worry, because anger can burn out quickly. But silence means something is coming. And when humanity finally spoke again, it would not be with words.
The Second Battle of Orion Gate. Ral'Vek remembered it clearly. Even now, years later, the memory felt heavy. Orion Gate was not just a battlefield, it was a key point in space. A massive wormhole station connected 3 major star systems. Whoever controlled it could move fleets quickly across half the galaxy. Ral'Vek's alliance controlled it first. They believed it was secure. The alliance had superior ships. Their cruisers were larger. Their weapons were stronger. Their shields were advanced. They had more numbers, more experience, more victories. Humans were still new compared to them. The alliance expected a short war, quick, clean, simple. But the humans did something no one expected. They did not attack the main fleet. They did not rush toward the gate. Instead, they disappeared. At first, the alliance commanders thought the humans were retreating. They were wrong. Human strike teams began hitting supply routes far behind the front lines. Fuel transports exploded. Cargo ships vanished. Repair stations were sabotaged. Shipyards were damaged from the inside. Small attacks, small losses, but they added up. Warships ran low on fuel. Spare parts became rare. Food supplies slowed. Every day the war continued, the alliance paid more. Humans were not trying to win quickly. They were trying to make war expensive, painfully expensive. Ral'Vek began to understand. Humans are not fighting our fleet, he told his officers. They are fighting our ability to fight. The alliance grew frustrated. They gathered their full strength at Orion Gate. They would crush the human fleet in one final battle. Thousands of ships filled space. Lasers burned across the darkness. Missiles streaked like angry stars. The human fleet was smaller, outnumbered, outgunned. Many alliance officers smiled. "This ends today," one said. Then, something unexpected happened. The human flagship moved forward alone. It did not retreat. It did not hide behind shields. It accelerated toward the wormhole gate. Alliance commanders were confused. "Are they surrendering?" someone asked. Ral'Vek watched carefully. "No," he said slowly. "They are committing." The human flagship began transmitting a single message across all channels: "For those who cannot fight." Then it fired at the wormhole stabilizers. The structure began to collapse. Energy storms exploded around the gate. The wormhole became unstable. Ships on both sides tried to retreat through it. Too late. The human flagship rammed directly into the gate core. There was a flash brighter than a star. The wormhole collapsed. The entire star system began to destabilize. Ships on both sides were trapped, including the human fleet, including the alliance fleet. Emergency jumps failed. Engines overloaded. Chaos spread.
Thousands of ships were lost. The Orion Gate was destroyed. The system became a graveyard of metal and fire. Across the galaxy, leaders watched in horror. Why would they destroy their own flagship? The council later asked. Ral'Vek answered quietly, to save billions. Beyond Orion Gate were heavily populated systems. If the Alliance had passed through, the war would have spread to civilian worlds. Humans chose to end it there, even if it meant sacrificing their best ship, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. They were willing to lose everything if it meant protecting others. Ral'Vek understood something that day. Humans could not be scared. They were not afraid of death. They could not be threatened. They were not afraid of loss. They could not be controlled. Because they did not fight for pride. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for those behind them. And when a species is ready to burn with the enemy just to stop the fire from spreading, that species becomes unstoppable. The Second Battle of Orion Gate changed the galaxy forever. And from that day forward, no one saw humanity as weak again.
Years passed. The wars that had shaken entire star systems ended. Treaties were signed. Borders were redrawn. Armies returned home. But something had changed. Every species in the galaxy noticed it. Humans had survived wars that should have destroyed them. They had been outnumbered, outgunned, and underestimated. And yet, they were not angry. They did not become cruel. They did not conquer other planets. They did not demand tribute or bend weaker species to their will. Instead, they began to rebuild. Worlds burned in battle slowly healed. Cities flattened by war slowly rose again. Factories and farms restarted, almost as if humanity was undoing the damage they had caused, one brick at a time. Former enemies received food shipments. Medical teams arrived where disease had spread. Engineers helped reconstruct buildings that humans themselves had destroyed in earlier fighting. The galaxy watched, confused and cautious. Many aliens could not understand it. One alien diplomat finally asked a human general during a meeting on neutral space, "Why help those who attacked you?" The human general looked calm, eyes steady. "Because someone has to break the cycle," he said. The words were simple, but the meaning was terrifying. Ral'Vek, who had fought hundreds of battles, felt fear again, not from weapons, not from fleets or monsters, from this. A species that could fight like demons, that could face impossible odds and survive, and yet choose mercy? That was more dangerous than any fleet, more powerful than any weapon, because mercy changes the rules of war. It creates loyalty in places where fear would create rebellion. It builds alliances that last longer than treaties. It inspires even the most cautious observers to trust, to follow, to work together. Ral'Vek had seen humans on the battlefield. He had seen them fight when death was certain, when survival was impossible. He had seen them sacrifice themselves to save millions. And now he saw that even after all of that, humans did not hate. They only chose to build. It was a type of strength no alien army had ever understood. Fear alone creates enemies. It forces submission through pain. It destroys alliances before they can grow. But respect? Respect builds empires. It turns former enemies into partners. It makes entire worlds stand together rather than fall apart. Ral'Vek realized then why humans were unlike any other species he had encountered. They were terrifying,
not because of how much destruction they could cause, not because of how clever or fast or strong they were. Terrifying because they could fight like gods and then forgive like mortals. He looked at the stars above and understood. If humans ever decided to fight for conquest instead of protection, there would be nothing in the galaxy capable of stopping them. And that was the truth that no weapon, no fleet, no council could ever measure. A species that chooses mercy after mastering war is unstoppable. The galaxy had survived monsters, machines, and natural disasters. But humanity? Humanity had survived war and turned it into power the universe had never imagined. Ral'Vek closed his eyes, shaking slightly. For the first time, he feared not what humans could destroy, but what they could create.
Back in the Galactic Council Hall, silence hung like a heavy fog. The young officer who had spoken earlier finally understood. The truth had sunk in, deeper than he could have imagined. "You fear them because they are strong," he said carefully. Ral'Vek slowly shook his head. "No," he replied, voice low and steady, but heavy with the weight of countless battles. He looked at the massive hologram behind him. The single word glowed brighter than ever. Humans. Ral'Vek's eyes scanned the assembly. Veterans from 20 star systems waited, tense and uneasy. "We fear them because they endure," he said. He paused, letting the words sink in. The hall seemed to shrink with the weight of the statement. "They adapt," he continued. "They change when the universe pushes against them. They do not crumble under pressure. They learn, they evolve, and when faced with impossible odds, they find a way." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Ral'Vek held up a hand. Silence returned. "They protect," he said, voice growing stronger. "They fight not just for themselves, but for everyone behind them, for the weak, for the innocent, for those who cannot fight. That makes them unpredictable." He walked slowly across the hall, each step echoing. "And if pushed," he let the words hang, "they do not stop." Ral'Vek raised his damaged hand, the one missing a finger, scarred from countless battles. "I have fought 1,000 wars," he said quietly. His voice carried the weight of experience, of a lifetime spent in conflict across countless systems. He stopped and faced the assembly directly. His eyes were sharp, piercing, filled with the memory of battles no one else could imagine. "Only one enemy ever made me question victory." The hall went completely silent. No one breathed. Every veteran, every council member waited. Ral'Vek let the sentence hang in the air. "If humanity ever fights for conquest instead of protection." No one spoke. They all understood what he meant. The galaxy had survived monsters that devoured stars. It had survived machines that wiped out entire civilizations. It had survived extinction events that left worlds barren. But humanity? Humanity was something else entirely. Not because they were the strongest, not because they had the largest fleets, not because they had weapons that could level planets, because they cared. Because they endured, because they adapted, because they protected what they loved, no matter the cost. And when humans fight for something they care about, there is no force in the universe strong enough to stop them. Ral'Vek looked around the hall one last time. He saw fear in their eyes. Not fear of power, not fear of weapons, fear of something far more terrifying, a species that could fight like demons, survive like immortals, and still choose mercy, loyalty, and protection. The hologram flickered and faded.
The lights dimmed. Silence returned. Finally, on the black screen, a single line appeared, glowing white against the dark. They fought 1,000 wars, but they feared humanity most. And in that moment, every veteran, every diplomat, every officer in the hall understood. Humanity was not just another species in the galaxy. Humanity was a force of nature, a storm that could not be tamed. And that was why the galaxy would never forget them.